Hello and welcome to another edition of As the Blade Turns. My name is Dave Leese. For those of you who are new here, please subscribe below and remember to smash that like button. In the last edition of As the Blade Turns, it was discussed that Russia would not be hosting a stage of the International Skating Union's Grand Prix Series next season. Many members of the Russian figure skating community immediately jumped to the conclusion that Russian skaters would again be kept out of international competition. In today's video, I wanted to discuss the reality of that situation, what is being discussed, and the notion of athlete neutrality. Russian athletes are currently banned from international sport competition due to the ongoing war in Ukraine, as it broke the Olympic charter by the invasion commencing immediately following the 2022 Olympic Games in Beijing. The situation is slightly different than other wars that are frequently brought up because they took place outside of this treaty that exists for the period engulfing the Olympic and Paralympic Games, which are supposed to promote peace and unity. Now, in reality, one could argue that the Olympics have promoted capitalism, commercialism, reckless spending, environmental destruction, and abject human treatment of athletes as some sort of pawns. And yet, the motto of higher, faster, and stronger unites billions around the world. The International Skating Union has yet to determine whether Russian and Belarusian athletes will be allowed to participate in the 2023-24 season, or what a path to re-entry would look like. Up until now, the ISU has been guided by the decisions of the International Olympic Committee. Thomas Bach, the leader of the IOC, has wavered in almost every speech over the last year, as he is subject to immense political pressure from all sides. On one hand, Russia is the aggressor in a major humanitarian crisis, with the Russian army increasingly targeting civilian targets in Ukraine and attempting to cause maximum suffering by knocking out power grids during the winter months. American and European leaders have danced around just how much support to provide in order to avoid all-out nuclear war. Yet this week, they have pledged to provide more powerful missiles and ammunition to the Ukrainian army. Germany is currently being pressured to provide their specialized Leopard 2 tanks to the Ukrainians. The Germans appear reluctant, and the rest of the world waits to see how they will respond. Thus, a resolution to the war by the spring seems unlikely. It will be difficult for the IOC to capitulate and allow Russians back into international sports in time for the 2023-24 season or the 24 Olympic Games in Paris. Yet the Russians continue to argue that they have some of the strongest athletes in the world, and many would agree, though the issue of doping remains a pervasive issue, and Rusada's status has yet to be resolved by WADA. There is also the reality that the Olympic Games is a business that relies on television ad revenue for its very success and continuation, and television advertisers need an event worth watching. It remains unclear if viewers will require the Russians as some sort of villain in order to turn in to their television sets or even stream on digital platforms, or if the presence of Russians would cause viewers to turn off the Olympics if they were allowed to compete, whether they were angry about the doping, the war, or a combination of factors. The global economy has also been impacted by the ongoing war, and if anything is to upset the average viewer, it is likely the almighty dollar. Thus, Thomas Bach has suggested the notion that athletes who are neutral and not tied to the war could somehow be allowed back into international competition. This would seemingly be on an individual basis, somehow like how the Olympic athletes from Russia or the Russian Olympic Committee were allowed to compete if they weren't convicted of doping. Maybe Russia wouldn't be in the title of the team for once, as though the world wouldn't know who the only neutral athletes were or what country they were from. In December, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected the participation of Russian athletes in the next Olympics in any capacity. Zelensky's remarks came after he spoke with IOC committee chief Thomas Bach. Bach said that the status of Russian and Belarusian athletes and their participation at the 24 Paris Games was still unclear. Zelensky said Kyiv was disappointed by the idea that Moscow or Minsk's athletes could compete, even under a neutral flag. One cannot try to be neutral when the foundations of peaceful life are being destroyed and universal human values are being ignored, he said in a statement. He added that the only response to Moscow is the complete isolation of the terrorist state on the international stage. In particular, this applies to the international sports events. Kyiv says Russian forces have killed 184 Ukrainian athletes since the war began. In a video address published later, Zelensky said, "We can only say one thing. A white or any neutral flag is impossible for Russian athletes, as all their flags are stained in blood." The U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee recently backed exploring the possibility of allowing Russian and Belarusian athletes to participate in the 2024 Games if they do not compete under their country's flags or colors. Bach said there was still no date set for a final decision on the matter. The other day, Evgeny Plushenko stated, "Performance on the international arena without Russian athletes is not a competition, but a light mode. Everyone knows perfectly well that Russian athletes are one of the most powerful and strong rivals. It is better to ride with strong opponents than to win without one goal. It is foolish to restrain Russian athletes, including sports, in a political game. All our opponents shout that sport is out of politics. But we all see it very well. Politics is number one, and she outgrew all the norms in general." If skaters would be allowed to be let back into the international sports arena, we must ask ourselves the question, just how neutral are the Russian skaters? And how involved in politics are they? On March 18th, 2022, a rally was held at the Moscow Luzhniki Sports Complex. The 2022 Moscow rally, officially known in Russia as For a World Without Nazism, was a political rally and concert at the Luzhniki Stadium in Moscow on March 18, 2022, which marked the 8th anniversary of the annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation. President Vladimir Putin spoke at the event, justifying the Russian invasion of Ukraine and praising Russian troops to a crowd of 200,000 people, per the Moscow City Police. Outlets, including the BBC and the Moscow Times, reported that state employees were transported to the venue and other attendees were paid or forced to attend. If only President Trump had thought of this for his own inauguration. The arena and stage featured slogans reading, "For a World Without Nazism," for the president, and for Russia, but featuring the Latin Z character in place of the usual Cyrillic Z. Some signs also featured St. George's ribbon-style Zs with the hashtag, which means "We don't abandon our own." The rally's content, described by Agence France Presse as heavily anti-Western and filled with Soviet nostalgia, emphasized patriotism, heroism, and support for the military. Speakers at the event included RT editor-in-chief Margarita Simonian, who said, "This is for our boys who are fighting scum right now." Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin thanked the guys who with weapons in their hands defend Russian citizens in the Donbass. "Half the world has united against us, but Russia is a strong country." And Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Zakharova, who called Russia a country and nation that safeguards peace and fights evil. Many of the speakers wore Z-shaped St. George's ribbons, which also appeared on signs in the crowd. Numerous Russian Olympic athletes were featured during the rally, including several who had recently returned from the 2022 Beijing Olympics. The Russian national anthem was played while they were on stage, a reference to the anthem being banned at the previous 3 Olympics due to state-sponsored doping. Athletes in attendance included cross-country skier Alexander Bolshunov, figure skaters Nikita Katsalapov, Vladimir Morozov, Victoria Sinitsina, and Evgenia Tarasova, rhythmic gymnasts Dina Averina and Arina Averina, and swimmer Evgeny Rylov, Russian gymnast Ivan Kuliak, who was undergoing the International Gymnastics Federation disciplinary proceedings for wearing a Z sticker at the 2022 Doha World Cup, which we'll discuss in a moment, wore an Olympic medal at the rally, though he had not competed in any Olympics. The rally marked Russian President Vladimir Putin's first public appearance since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. In his speech, which he opened by quoting the Constitution of Russia, Putin congratulated the people of Crimea and Sevastopol and wished them a happy anniversary of the annexation of Crimea. He went on to discuss those areas' finances and infrastructure, claiming that instead of Ukraine's leftover financing provided, Russia needed to drag Crimea out of that humiliating position. Putin further alleged a genocide by Ukraine against the people of Donbass before quoting the Bible's no greater love passage from John 15. Finally, Putin noted that Fyodor Ushakov's birthday was the 24th of February, the same date that the invasion of Ukraine was launched in 2022. Svetlana Horkina and Evgeny Plushenko posted Instagram stories of themselves at the rally, which also featured the trashing and burning of Ukrainian flags in the background. Speedo terminated their endorsement deal with Olympic champion Evgeny Rylov in response to his participation in the rally. He was also subsequently suspended from the Energy Standard International Swimming Club of the International Swimming League, along with all other support staff and athletes from Russia. Later in the same week, Rylov withdrew from competing at the 2022 World Aquatics Championships, and FINA announced his participation in the rally was under investigation in regards to potentially violating FINA rules. On April 20th, 2022, he received a 9-month suspension from FINA from all competitions and activities organized or sanctioned by FINA, including any international competition on the FINA World Aquatic calendar. It appears that both Sinitsina and Katsalapov and Tarasova and Morozov would be hard-pressed to declare neutrality, though both teams appear to be heading towards retirement anyways. Yet rhythmic gymnasts Dina and Irina Averina were called back to training by coach Irina Wiener after their failure to win gold at the 2021, or 20, whatever you want to call it, Olympic Games. Wiener rejected their plans to retire. They had actually been considering participating in Ice Age, but their figure skating television dreams would have to wait. If Russia wants to be allowed back in the 2024 Paris Games, even as neutral athletes, the Averina twins and Evgeny Rylov are surely among those the country would wish to participate. Russian gymnast Ivan Kuliak was given a 1-year ban by the International Gymnastics Federation for displaying a symbol on his uniform supporting the invasion of Ukraine. Kuliak had taped the Z symbol, seen on Russian tanks and military vehicles in Ukraine and embraced by supporters of the war, to his vest for a medal ceremony at a World Cup event in March in Doha. Along with the ban, Kuliak was forced to return the bronze medal he won on parallel bars. The 20-year-old Kuliak stood next to a gold medalist from Ukraine on the podium in Doha. If the protective measures keeping Russian athletes from competing are still in place on May 17, 2023, the ban shall continue and expire 6 months after the removal of said measures, said the International Gymnastics Federation's disciplinary committee. The commission found that Kuliak breached Federation statutes of discipline, ethics, code of conduct, and technical regulations when he wore the letter Z on his singlet during the competition and the award ceremony. The panel said no violations were established against Russian delegation leader Valentina Rodionenko and coach Igor Kalabushkin. During the time of the Moscow rally, eteri tutberidze quietly deleted all posts of herself with Vladimir Putin from her Instagram. Her daughter, Diana Davis, and her partner Gleb Smolkin flew to the United States and were quickly married in Las Vegas, Nevada. Davis and Smolkin also began posting on Instagram in English when they had previously posted in Russian. Eteri tutberidze's athletes, including Kamila Valieva, Anna Sherbakova, Alena Zagitova, Evgenia Medvedeva, and Alexandra Trusova, did not appear in the rally, though they were all invited to participate, and all are prominent figures of the Russian state-sponsored sports propaganda. Kamila Valieva appeared in billboards and banners throughout Russia at this time, and we can only imagine that Vladimir Putin would have loved the symbols of their participation. Tutberidze also reportedly refused to allow the Z to be displayed at her Team Tutberidze ice shows last spring. Yet, if you recall, when Tutberidze spoke to a figure skater at the Fort Lauderdale airport and was taking photos with adult skaters at American ice skating rinks, she said that she did not support the war or Vladimir Putin. Yet, her neutrality is also questionable. For a number of years prior to the invasion of Ukraine, Tutberidze was amassing a small fortune as the manager of her army of figure skaters. And though she is known for her Team Tutberidze ice shows and competitive success of her skaters and their prize money, she is also the first person in figure skating, aside from Tessa Virtue, to really understand and harness the power and potential financial windfall of being a social media influencer. Immediately prior to the games, Tutberidze's athletes were racking up endorsement deals with a number of outlets. Alena Zagitova was officially a commentator on Russian Channel 1, even though the press argued she was rather inarticulate and particularly uneducated. Channel 1 is controlled and financed by the Russian government. By making peace with Eteri Tutberidze, Evgenia Medvedeva also secured herself a future professional career and began being featured in Channel 1 programs as a commentator and as a participant of Russian Ice Age, which is broadcast on Channel 1. The channel has also had a large cooperation from Tutberidze skaters, prominently featuring them and the coach on the channel, which only built the channel's figure skating coverage and the notoriety and social media following of the skaters. Recently, Sasha Trusova has fought with the channel and currently has her own deal with Match TV, where she appears in videos and writes columns. Tutberidze was also known for sporting the G from Russian oil company Gazprom during the COVID-19 pandemic. That company was one of the first companies sanctioned by President Biden when the war broke out. This is not Tutberidze's only questionable endorsement. She was also tied to Sberbank, which is also owned by the Russian government. That bank sponsored athlete Anna Sherbakova, who was featured in a banking commercial as a 17-year-old dancing around, clutching her ubiquitous stuffed animal. Tutberidze has also received numerous state awards, pensions, apartments, and cars due to her success as a coach. She continues to coach in Russia, even as her daughter and son-in-law have looked into representing at least 3 federations other than Russia, and Tutberidze herself contacted the United States Figure Skating Association.
Быть первым завтра значит не останавливаться на достигнутом. Постоянно учиться, меняться, становиться лучше и не сомневаться, что все получится. Думаешь, это о ком-то другом? О чем-то невозможном? Стать первым в своем деле тебе по силам. Это все про тебя.
On April 26, 2022, the medalists of the Beijing Olympics were awarded in the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin met only with the champions. He presented orders and congratulated Kamila Valieva on her birthday. Anna Sherbakova and Eteri Tutberidze were curiously absent. Initially, the meeting was planned for the beginning of April, with the outfitter of the Olympic team, Zasport, even naming the exact date, April 6th. Then, everything was moved to the end of the month. And on April 26th, the champions and prize winners of the Beijing Games finally got to visit the Kremlin. By the way, not only was the meeting postponed, but also its broadcast, as a result, was shown an hour and a half later than planned. However, all meetings took place in the morning, although Rossiya 24 announced that the broadcast was actually live. The champions and prize winners had a different ceremony. Only the gold medalists were invited to meet with the president. I guess he agrees with Valery Lyukin that there's only one color medal in this family. The rest, like silver medalist Sasha Trusova, received state awards from the hands of Russian presidential aide Igor Levitin and Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Chernyshenko. For silver and bronze, athletes were awarded medals of the Order of Merit for the Fatherland of the first and second degrees. Gold medalists received either the Order of Honor or the slightly lower Order of Friendship. These awards include a substantial pension for life, and for the champion athletes also typically receive cars and apartments. We've been waiting for this day for quite a long time, 2 months. For us, this is an opportunity to once again remember the Olympics in Beijing, to relive these emotions. They are remembered. They overwhelm inside, said figure skater Vladimir Morozov. Not everyone made it to the important meeting with the president. Figure skater Anna Sherbakova went to the tutberidze show in Nizhny Novgorod, and skier Alexander Bolshanov had several reasons for missing, including illness, planned surgery, and family circumstances. But he was at the rally in Moscow. Eteri tutberidze also did not come. Her absence was explained that she and Sherbakova, along with other skaters, were at the Champions on Ice show. Tutberidze did attend in 2018, where she received the Order of Honor. The meeting opened with a speech by Putin, in which he recalled all the victories of Russia in Beijing. I am very glad for you to see you, congratulate you on a wonderful performance, and present awards. You certainly deserve them with your talent, hard work, skill, your dedication to the sport, and its values and ideals. Without any exaggeration, your brilliant and strong-willed victories, and all our Olympians, Russian athletes, have become a real decoration of the Games. Many fans, not only in our country, but throughout the world, looked at this with admiration and rejoiced. And you have proven once again that you are among the best athletes in the world. The president paid special attention to Kamila Valieva, and he spoke on the situation with doping and congratulated her on her 16th birthday. Of course, the whole country, figure skating fans all over the world, were especially worried about Kamila. She absorbed all the most complex elements of figure skating, its plasticity, beauty, power, and tenderness into her talent. With her work, she brought sports to the height of real art. Such perfection cannot be achieved dishonestly, with the help of some additional means or manipulations. Yes, in figure skating, all these means are not needed. You and I perfectly understand and know this. Let's congratulate Kamila Valieva on her birthday for now. She celebrates it today. I will still have the opportunity to do this in the informal part. The informal part began immediately after the awards were presented. Glasses of champagne were brought into the hall. Valieva reportedly drank lemonade. Putin also concluded the ceremony by praising Trusova's 5 quads, although she wasn't invited to meet him directly, and speaking about Russia's exclusion from international sports. The suspension of athletes from Russia and Belarus not only violated the fundamental principles of sport, but also openly and cynically violated basic human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948, everything is written down there directly. It's not about the status, not about the political, legal, or international status of the country that the athlete represents. It's about the person himself, the athlete. These rights have been violated. As tutberidze has distanced herself from Putin, Evgeny Plushenko has filled the void. If you notice, how he is discussed in the Russian press has changed as he has increasingly tied himself to Vladimir Putin. It was not that long ago that Tatiana Tarasova laughed at him and said he wasn't really a coach. That changed following the Olympics. And if you notice, Evgeny Plushenko and Yana Rudkovskaya remained silent about Kamila Valieva's doping scandal, even though the couple was famous for criticizing tutberidze at every opportunity for years. On April 7th, 2022, Evgeny Plushenko's show Union of Champions in Tula opened in such a way that some skaters later had to make excuses. The skaters claimed that they did not quite understand that the ice show would be preceded by a pro-war rally. Alena Kostornaia, Elizaveta Tuktamisheva, Alexandra Boykova and Dmitry Kozlovsky, Alexandra Stepanova and Ivan Bukin, Mark Kondratyuk, Evgeny Semenenko, Adelina Sotnikova, Dmitry Aliev, Alexander Samarin, and the young skaters of Plushenko's Angels, including his son, performed in Tula. The Tula media called it a patriotic project. They say that tickets were not sold. There were 3,000 spectators in the hall. According to the TV channel First Tulski, which broadcast the show, with the support of the government of the region, public figures, volunteers, students, and representatives of the Figure Skating Federation were invited to the Ice Palace. Posters and tickets to the show proclaimed pro-war sayings, including "For Russia," "For the world," "For the future." The show started with a delay of 35 to 40 minutes. One of the unverified versions includes that the skaters staged a protest and did not want to go on the ice. They even contacted the general director of the federation, Alexander Kogan, but he convinced them to participate. The Union of Champions had two pairs of hosts on the ice, one being Yana Rudkovskaya and Elena Rodionova, who announced the participants and had short conversations with them. And there were two other hosts who presented the show as patriotic several times. Rudkovskaya clarified after the event, "Our tour is to support our athletes who were disqualified due to sanctions and did not get to go to the World Championships. Our show is out of politics. We are for our athletes." All of the participants went on for the final number in t-shirts that read, "They won't catch up with us." Now, perhaps some of this unpleasantly surprised the skaters. Alexandra Boykova wrote a post on Telegram during the show. "Friends, I want to say that we are only participating in Evgeny Plushenko's show, Union of Champions. We will present exclusively our programs within the show. Our creativity is figure skating and nothing more." She added in the comments, "No one knew about the event before the show. It doesn't apply to us." After the end of the show, Elizaveta Tuktamisheva spoke. "I really wanted to believe that sport is out of politics, but today it turned out not to be so. I love figure skating. I sincerely love what I do. I live it. I want to participate in competitions. I want to skate. I want to put on new programs. I want to participate in ice shows. But I do not want the performances of athletes to become a way of manipulation and persuasion. I'm completely confused." The Minister of Sports of the Tula region, Dmitry Yakovlev, tried to explain. "Some of the guys were worried, and I perfectly understand their feelings and fears. But in the end, we discussed this with them. They got a lot of pleasure from skating, from the audience who met them standing up. There was no politics in this show. This is the sport of the highest achievements. I would call it that. The guys showed real sport, and we showed that they are supported, that they want to see them even more here in Russia. It is a great honor for us that such athletes skated in our arena." Rudkovskaya later was quoted as saying, "We didn't even know that you had any other events going on. In general, it should only have been ours, but we saw that there is also a block of children's amateur performances. In general, you had a fun and interesting time." She was asked, "Aren't you afraid that the participation of athletes in such an event, where there is a lot of symbols, will entail sanctions? The letter Z appeared on the same tickets." "It had nothing to do with us. We didn't have tickets. We only have our show. I don't know what you were talking about. We only have the Union of Champions show. We were invited to this show. We performed in it." Yes, let's discuss the shows. In 2022, the projects of Tatiana Navka, Ilya Averbuk, and Evgeny Plushenko received 92.4 million rubles from the Presidential Fund for Cultural Initiatives, and in 2023, they requested 158 million. Almost every top figure skater participates in shows by these skaters throughout the year. Trusova stars with Plushenko, Valyeva and Zagitova with Navka, Medvedeva and Sherbakova with Averbuk. In 2023, all of them have applied for grants. Plushenko applied for 79.7 million for the Union of Champions, Averbuk 53 million for Anna Karenina, and Navka 25.3 million for a series of performances under the general title Grand Ice Show. The winners will be announced on March 10th. Everything will be decided by the applications and the arguments that the applicants set out in them. Averbuk is also a large television producer. Medvedeva, Zagitova, Sinitsina and Katsalapov, and Sherbakova all participated in his Ice Age show this year. In the past, he also produced a show where male Russian figure skaters teamed up with Russian ballerinas. All programs are broadcast on state-owned Channel 1. Alena Zagitova once performed in a show in Dubai for Tatiana Navka that was investigated by Russia itself for money laundering. Tatiana Navka, her husband Dmitry Peskov, Yana Rudkovskaya, and Irina Wiener's husband Alisher Usmanov have all been sanctioned by several governments. Averbuk has yet to be sanctioned. Recently, Mikhail Kolyada appeared in a St. Petersburg show where he dressed in a Russian military uniform and stood on a Russian military jeep. The show was devoted to the 80th anniversary of the end of the Leningrad blockade. This season, all Russian skaters on the national team have been participating in events put on by the Russian Figure Skating Federation, broadcast on Channel 1, that award them tremendous prize money to incentivize training and participation. The IOC allows Russian athletes back, providing that they are neutral. Can any of the Russian figure skaters truly be considered neutral at this point? In other news, a Croatian news outlet is reporting that an oligarch's yacht that was being held under sanctions by authorities has disappeared from a Croatian marina. In a bizarre twist, authorities have also discovered that the yacht has been missing for 3 months, having been replaced by a nearly identical ship at the time it sailed from the marina. The 115-foot Sunseeker, named Irina VU, is owned by Alisher Usmanov, a sanctioned oligarch and Putin crony from Uzbekistan. The ship was confiscated and dry-docked in the marina as part of the sanctions process. A locator data for the ship says that the yacht is currently in Turkey. Turkey has become a refuge for many oligarchs since it has thus far refused to turn over yachts and private aircraft. Alisher Usmanov is the former husband of Irina Wiener, the undisputed queen and head coach of Russian rhythmic gymnastics. The timing of their divorce was suspicious, leading many to question its true intention. Usmanov, who became a billionaire with a major stake in USM, a holding company that controls Russia's iron ore production, may have won the battle with Irina VU, but he potentially lost a much larger trophy when German authorities impounded his Dilbar in April. That 512-foot super yacht is the world's largest yacht by volume. Usmanov previously led Gazprom, which sponsors Team tutberidze.